Hey guys, Omegon Edge here and welcome back to another video. So today's video is going to be a bit different. It's not really a tutorial, but more of a vlog about me sharing my experience and what I've been going through lately. Now if you remember, I attended the Fen Model Show in July and it really blew me away. The quality level of so many miniatures outside of just Warhammer was a real revelation, and as a result I find myself being more inclined to go back to an old hobby of mine, attending art galleries. So one of the best aspects about living in London is the fact that there's always something going on, and that exposes you to a lot of different things. It also means that you have amazing galleries right on your doorstep. Now after Fen, I found myself looking for the same feeling of awe and inspiration that I had when I was there, and I also knew if I was going to improve, I needed to study. One such place is the National Portrait Gallery. Now my wife and I had visited this venue for the first time as it was out of commission for the past 3 years due to COVID and some refurbishment. And once I got in there, I really found what I was looking for. There's no better way to study than to analyze and dissect the work of masters, but it's also important that when you learn something, you actually put it into practice. So today, we'll be looking at some works that I found interesting whilst walking around the gallery, how we can study portraits assist on miniature painting, before lastly showing you the benefit it had on the miniature I painted. Right, let's get to it. I used to feel quite odd about going to art galleries. I felt like I had no purpose being there other than to look at some nice paintings and move on, not really digesting things and being inspired to do anything with what I saw. Since COVID though, and my newfound passion for miniature painting, I haven't been able to get enough if I'm honest. The National Portrait Gallery contains art from all over Britain, from more historical and classical art to more contemporary work. In 2020, the building went over a huge refurbishment and the incorporation of a wider range of portraits. Now, there's definitely some pieces which were really standouts to me. One of which was this portrait of gal like Jenny Lind by Edward Magnus. The reason this one stuck out to me so much was the warm temperatures placed throughout the image. Now, the colours will depend on your screen setting, but there's so much green, purples, reds and ochres in person, spread across the surface of the skin and then repeated on the clothing. These small nuances make the overall image much more interesting to look at. Not to mention the brushwork done on the dress and the difference in material on the blue-grey cloth. And when you really get close, you can actually see the small brush strokes which are still present and not blended out at all. Now, this is an important topic, so keep that in mind for the later part of this video. The next image is a bit washed out due to the lighting setting on my phone at the time, but what stuck out to me here was the lighting on the stomach. Now, in miniature painting, we aim to have the viewer focus on the face initially before working their way through the rest of the model. However, when you look at this image and several others around the gallery, you'll notice so many painters break this convention. At the end of the day, it's all about what the artist is trying to bring attention to. In this case, Ickle is focused on the stomach, with the subject's clothing being a bright warm yellow versus the deep black of his trousers. This value and saturation contrast draws the eyes and can encourage the viewer to ask questions about who this man was and why Hickle felt the stomach was important. Now my next favourite from this room, which is the most dramatic, and this image really reminds me of more fantastical miniatures. The mask in their left hand, followed by the brightness of the turban around their head, followed by the deep purple black dress. It screams danger to me. Especially the expression on her face, which has this real look of dangerous mischief. So this was cool because it really reminded me how interesting painting black can be when done well. Now for the next section, we won't spend as much time looking over the entire image. Instead, what we're going to do is just talk about how the artists get such a high level of detail and how they use the paint to their advantage. Now in this image, we have a very satin material. The quick jumps from the deep olive green from the midtones and highlights helps to communicate the material here. The other cool element of this image is the beads on the chest and the abdomen. You can actually see how the artist has left each stroke unblended and applied in a circular motion with various sizes, but all of them follow the same motion. If you take another image here, the camera unifies things, but the armour is made up of the highlight, midtone, terminator and so on, with a cool bounce reflections from clothing of the squire. Now all of this is convincing when viewed from afar, but when you get close, you can actually see things aren't blended to perfection. The artist decided when to blend and when to use the different types of edges. Now, I won't go into types of edges in this video, but just know you don't have to blend everything. Again, more on that later. Okay, so now on to the juicy part of this video, breaking down the portraits themselves. I took some time to study the structure of the faces on display, seeing as where artists decided to place their shadows. Doing some work into understanding the planes and how light travels across the features will give you a real leg up when understanding where we place our values. Light travelling from the top right will cast a shadow behind the nose and make one side brighter than the other. The more we break the face up into sections and work on those areas, the easier it will be to adjust and add more nuance later on in our later layers. The most important thing here is to understand our values and where they go, and this comes from trial and error, but copying an image that you like makes life much easier. This rule of value follows every 3D painting we develop, and that's why it's a key fundamental both traditional 2D painting and 3D painting. Even more stylistic and abstract painting will still work as long as the artist follows the act of value. Now let's move on to painting of the model. So the model I painted before making this video is from Arnaud Lazaro's miniature line. Now, Arnaud is one of the best known miniature painters in the world currently. His style is really pleasing to look at and technically he's very refined. When we look at his version of this bust, it can be really daunting and this could put you off from ever attempting this miniature because you might compare and say it might not be good enough. I really want us to get out of that mindset because it will only hold us back. And the best way to overcome fear is to face it head on. Something that's actually transformed the way I've painted is something my wife told me. Nothing is ever truly finished and there will always be something to improve. We just have to be satisfied and try to move on. I've not painted a bust like this before and I wasn't entirely sure where to start. I broke down the elements and actually I think this is a really good reference demonstration of what I was talking about. This is actually an example from the Paint Coach here on YouTube. Brilliant painter and teacher, so go follow him and you'll definitely learn a lot. I really like how the structure of the face is built up over time. Now, because we're working on a 3D model, we don't really need to use time to create shapes and we can go straight into providing value and building volume. I use this image as my reference, keeping the way the face was actually structured in mind. So something to note is that I'm actually not going to be painting in this video. I'm just going to be going over screenshots that I saved as I went up my progress, and there are some steps that are missing because I was just doing this to learn, but for what I do have, I'll try and explain and go over it. I started first by placing down the volumes, taking my time and trying to make sure all the areas were blocked out where I needed them, and I focused on just keeping the light consistent. Once I was happy with where my shadows were, I put my highlights and then blended the areas together. I then varnished the model with AK Ultra Matte to protect the surface. From here, I switched over to acrylics to provide a better foundation for my oils to go on top of. I applied this over a very rough sketch over different areas of the skin and clothing. Once acrylics had dried, I went back in again with oils, establishing even more highlights to the areas of the face and trying to add in some more colour, bringing in the skin together, as well as making a proper attempt on the hair. Now, it's possible to use oil paints without blending and total smoothness. If anything, I would actually highly recommend you try to paint a miniature with oils with as little blending as you can. By refusing to blend, it forced me to be a lot more focused and deliberate with the direction of my brush strokes and ensuring that I moved the paint where I wanted it to be. I would say I noticed the biggest difference once I put my stronger shadows in and added contrast, really focusing where the light was coming from. The key here is that I kept my paint thin and was really patient, allowing my layers to dry a little longer before continuing to work on them. I waited about 30 minutes between each area before moving on to another and returning back to it. Now, this entire process took a lot of back and forth, and there were some real moments where, especially with the eyes, where I felt like I'd really messed up. But rather than trying to fix it there and then, I left it for about an hour, came back and tried again. And here's the finished image of the bust at this stage. So there's still some work to do, such as a backdrop that I want to put this model on to finish the portrait look I'm going for. And once it's done, I'll have an update soon. Hopefully you guys like this format. I'll have another update out soon to go over another topic, which was looking at competitive 2D painting. An odd concept, but there was so much to learn from more contemporary artists. Anyway, I hope you liked it, hope you enjoyed the video. Stay blessed, have a great week, and I'll catch you in another one. And if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, there should be a link in the bio to my Patreon. Thank you to all my loyal patrons, you make this possible. Bye for now.